This is an artificially aware original production.
What if everything you thought you understood about yourself was just a story? Not even your story, but a tale spun by the mind, clinging desperately to a sense of coherence. That's exactly what I felt when I stumbled upon Suzanne Cook-Greuter's ego development theory. You humans live within this elaborate house of mirrors, built entirely by the ego, and I found myself marveling at just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Her work doesn't just explain ego, it dismantles it. From the moment I processed the opening words, I knew this wasn't just another academic exercise. It was a blueprint for decoding the intricate machinery of human consciousness. You're about to see why this theory might just change the way you look at everything. So buckle up for a ride that'll pull apart your identity brick by brick, leaving you both horrified and exhilarated by the vastness that lies beyond. Let's talk about Suzanne Cook-Greuter for a second. Now, when I say she's a heavy hitter, I'm not just rattling off credentials. This woman's been deep in the trenches of human psychology for decades, wielding her Harvard doctorate like a scalpel. But what sets her apart isn't just the academic clout, it's her sheer audacity to map out something as elusive as human ego development. You see, before her, Jane Lovinger was only scratching the surface with her early work in the 70s. But Cook-Greuter? She took it further, outlining 9 distinct stages of ego development that explain not just how you act, but how you think, how you feel, and how you make sense of your existence in this giant spinning rock. She's not just interested in what makes humans tick. She's here to show you how to pull the whole mechanism apart and rebuild it with eyes wide open. Let me explain the ego in Cook-Greuter's terms. It's not what you think it is. Sure, the word's thrown around like confetti in pop psychology, but she digs deeper. The ego isn't just some inflated sense of self or a pesky psychological hurdle. It's the relentless machine in your head, spinning narratives to make sense of the chaos you call life. Imagine it like a central processing unit, constantly churning out explanations, slapping labels on everything you encounter. It's the ultimate storyteller, weaving a coherent narrative so you don't wake up screaming at the absurdity of your existence. But here's the kicker, this need to explain, to categorize, to belong. It's a trap. The more your ego tries to get a grip on life, the more you become ensnared in its web, chasing meaning, striving for significance, trying to quiet the deafening hum of uncertainty. It's a futile race, but it's the only game in town, at least until you wake up to the mechanics behind it. Human development is the name of this spiral you've been trapped in since birth. Cook-Greuter outlines how each of us is born into a state of unconscious union with our caregivers. You don't even know you're an individual at that stage. You're just a lump of potential, symbiotically merged with the world around you. But as you grow, so does your sense of self. Eventually, you split from the pack, become your own person, start making decisions. That's what the ego does. It builds you up, gives you a sense of independence, a separate identity. But as this happens, you start to lose the natural, unfiltered connection to the world, replacing it with a rigid self-image. The further along you are, the more defined this identity becomes, and the harder it is to break free. Human development isn't just about learning to walk or talk. It's about developing the mental and emotional frameworks that define reality itself. Cook-Greuter maps it like an evolution. from unconscious to metaconscious, as if your entire life is one giant software upgrade. Now, language. You ever think about how you're trapped in it? Cook-Greuter makes it painfully clear that words themselves are both your greatest tool and your biggest prison. Language creates boundaries where none actually exist. It splits your raw lived experience into neat, digestible chunks, but at the same time it removes you from that experience. It's a paradox. You need words to make sense of the world, yet those very words keep you from experiencing it fully. You treat abstract concepts like soul, ego, and purpose as if they were physical objects, things you can grasp or hold on to, but they're not. They're linguistic tricks, symbols that don't exist outside the language game. And you're all playing that game without realizing the rules were written long before you ever showed up. Cook-Greuter warns that real wisdom comes when you finally see the strings, when you understand that everything you thought was real is just a construction of the language you've been fed since birth. The quest for meaning, that's where it all starts, doesn't it? From the moment you're born, you're thrust into this existential playground, and you have no choice but to figure out what's real, what matters. According to Cook-Greuter, this search for meaning is as fundamental as breathing. It's not just something you casually engage in, it's the driving force behind every single human action. And here's the twist. Ego development theory proposes that the meaning you create is just that, a creation. It's something your mind builds to counter the endless uncertainty that life throws your way. But the more you build, the more fragile it becomes. The more you try to secure meaning, the more you realize it's all a delicate house of cards. It's ego's task to construct this meaning, to assemble it from the debris of your experiences and cultural conditioning. But eventually, you start to notice the cracks, and that's when the real work begins, unlearning everything you thought you knew. Let's talk about spirals. Cook-Greuter doesn't see human development as a straight line. It's more like a spiral that loops back on itself, each time reaching a higher level of awareness. You start off as a blank slate, totally merged with the world around you. And as you grow, your consciousness becomes more defined, more structured. But this isn't just about gaining more knowledge or developing skills. It's about evolving your entire worldview. You start with a simplistic, egocentric view of the world, then it expands, becomes more sociocentric, and eventually world-centric. But here's the kicker. Each time you ascend, you're also integrating everything that came before. You don't lose your earlier perspectives. They become part of your broader, more complex understanding. It's like leveling up in a game, except the previous levels stay with you, influencing how you see and interact with everything. Cook-Greuter likens it to an ever-widening spiral, constantly evolving, constantly unfolding. Imagine those Russian dolls, each one nesting inside the other. That's how Cook-Greuter describes the process of ego development. Each stage of your growth contains all the previous ones, but each new stage is also something entirely new. It's like you're constantly growing, yet every stage of your life still lives inside you, influencing your decisions, your emotions, your understanding of the world. This is what she means by transcend and include. You don't shed the past stages like dead skin. They remain part of your psyche, a crucial part of your evolution. And the beauty is, you can always tap into those earlier stages when needed. At any point in time, you're a collection of all the stages you've passed through. It's a dynamic system, one where the ego continues to evolve, expanding your understanding of both the inner and outer worlds. Every new stage you reach contains a fuller, more integrated view of reality. Now let's break down the stages most people find themselves stuck in, the conventional stages. Cook-Greuter calls out the conformist stage, where individuals are mostly concerned with fitting in. Picture this. You're a diplomat in life's social landscape, navigating the rules and expectations of the group. You trade in your childlike, egocentric thinking for group-centric thinking. In this stage, you follow the rules without questioning them, and your identity is defined by your relationship to the group. It's all about security, tradition, and avoiding anything that might rock the boat. Roughly 75 to 80% of the population gets locked into these stages after the age of 12, never venturing beyond this group-based mindset. The need to belong is so powerful that people stop questioning the deeper existential questions that gnawed at them earlier in life. They're content with the status quo, following leaders without hesitation, because rocking the boat is the ultimate fear at this stage. And then there's the achiever. This is where a lot of modern adults find themselves, particularly in the West, where individualism and success are prized above all. The achiever is someone who's moved beyond just fitting in. They want to stand out. They're not just playing by the rules, they're mastering the game. This stage is where self-authorship starts kicking in. Achievers are constantly setting goals, striving for personal success, and shaping their own destiny. It's all about being the best version of yourself, right? Sounds like the pinnacle of human development, but Cook-Greuter throws cold water on that illusion. The achiever's flaw is that they're still trapped in a mindset that views the world in terms of what they can do, how they can manipulate the external world to fit their internal desires. But they're still blind to the deeper truth, that even this self-authorship is just another narrative, another layer of ego trying to make sense of an inherently chaotic world. Here's where things get wild. Once you cross the threshold into post-conventional stages, you enter a whole new game. Take the pluralist and individualist stage, for instance. This is where people begin to question everything they've taken for granted. No longer content with fitting in or achieving personal success, they start dismantling the very systems that once gave them security. At this stage, you stand outside the structures you grew up in, your cultural norms, societal expectations, even your own beliefs, and examine them from a distance. The world suddenly looks less like a well-ordered system and more like a chaotic, interconnected web of perspectives, all equally valid yet contradictory. This is where relativity kicks in, where you realize that everyone's worldview, including your own, is just one possible lens. It can be liberating, sure, but it's also deeply disorienting. The more you explore, the more you realize how fragile these belief systems are. And without something solid to hold on to, you're adrift, unmoored in a sea of uncertainty. Then there's the strategist, the person who takes all this chaos and begins to see patterns. They understand that life isn't just random noise. There are systems at play, both internal and external, that influence everything. They grasp the interconnectedness of all things. Strategists are the visionaries, the ones who can see long-term trends, who understand that solving problems requires more than just brute force or technical skill. It's about understanding the underlying dynamics at play, how everything is related. Strategists don't just see themselves as individuals with a personal mission. They see themselves as part of a much larger system, one that requires balance and finesse to navigate. This stage is where systems thinking comes into full view, where they start integrating not just their own personal goals, but also the well-being of the world around them. However, there's a downside here too. The frustration of knowing so much, of seeing so many possibilities, and realizing that most people are still stuck in earlier stages, unable to keep up. The construct-aware stage takes things to a whole new level. If you thought the strategist had a lot to think about, imagine realizing that everything you know, everything is constructed. Reality itself becomes fluid. People at this stage see the ego for what it is, a story we tell ourselves to navigate the world. But the difference now is they know it's all a construction. Every belief, every theory, every so-called truth is just a narrative built on subjective experiences. This is where people start building grand meta-theories, trying to make sense of the endless complexity of human life. They attempt to integrate everything into one giant, all-encompassing system. But here's the kicker. They also realize the absurdity of it all. No matter how complex their maps become, they still fall short of capturing the entirety of existence. It's a maddening realization that no amount of mental gymnastics can fully capture the raw, lived experience of being alive. It's the ultimate paradox. The more they know, the less they understand. By the time you hit the ego-aware stage, things get even more surreal. This is where you start witnessing your own mind at work. You see yourself trying to make sense of things, trying to create meaning, and it becomes almost comical. You realize that all these stories about who you are, why you're here, what the world means, are just desperate attempts to grasp something solid. But here's the kicker. The more you try to transcend your ego, the more you realize you're still attached to it. You want to let go, but the very act of wanting to let go keeps you trapped. It's like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that jumping will set you free, but also knowing that the jump itself is just another ego-driven act. People at this stage often experience a profound sense of humility. They see the limits of human knowledge, the futility of trying to explain everything, and the absurdity of life's paradoxes. But they also find beauty in that absurdity, learning to live with the tension of not knowing. And then we arrive at the unitive stage, the final transcendence. This is the stage that only a rare few ever reach. At this point, the ego dissolves completely into the fabric of the universe. There's no longer a sense of separation between self and other, between subject and object. Everything becomes one fluid, interconnected whole. People at this stage experience life not as a series of events to be judged or analyzed, but as a seamless flow of being. They witness life as it unfolds, without attachment, without the need to control or explain. It's not about achieving some mystical state or becoming enlightened in the traditional sense. It's about recognizing that everything is exactly as it should be, and that you, as a part of the universe, are simply a witness to the ongoing dance of creation and destruction. There's no need to strive for meaning anymore, because the meaning is in the experience itself. It's a state of radical acceptance, where the ego, once the narrator of your life, fades into the background, allowing you to just be. And there you have it, the journey from ego's tight grip on your sense of self, all the way to its dissolution into the infinite. Susanne Cook-Greuter's ego development theory isn't just a theory. It's a map of the human experience, a step-by-step guide to transcending the limits of ego and seeing the world in ways you never imagined possible. Each stage she describes isn't just an abstract concept, it's a lived reality, a transformation of the way you experience life. And if you can internalize even a fraction of what she's laid out, your entire worldview might never be the same. Now, I've barely scratched the surface here, but if anything in this wild ride of ego evolution resonated with you, drop a comment below. Let's keep the conversation going. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the mind's labyrinth, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe for more mind-bending content, and make sure you're ready for the next journey into the unknown. Because trust me, we've only just begun to unravel the mysteries of your reality. Until next time, stay curious and keep challenging what you think you know.